E aí, gente, B.E.D Brewer aqui. Today we're going to talk about mash tuns. I'm going to show you two mash tuns that I've used, talk about the benefits of each, and talk about my thoughts on each and which one I prefer. In addition, I'm going to give you the information that I wish was available to me so that I could make a better decision as far as which way to go in the beginning. Here is the 120 quart Igloo Cooler, and down here you can see that I replaced the tap from the screw off and all on to a picnic tap from Coleman. I do have a little bit of problems with it leaking. Also around here I want to bring note to the broken hinges. I ended up breaking all three of these hinges 3 times already, just by opening it and it being very large. Now a couple of other things. Now you see that this cooler is very wide. It's almost twice shoulder length, maybe a little bit more even. So when you have your arms in this position, you don't have any leverage to lift. So the more weight you have in here, the more difficult it is. So when you have 20 pounds of grain, 22 pounds of grain, plus about 50 pounds of water, it is very, very difficult to move this around and actually impossible as a single person. So the way I would use this is I would have 2 brewing bags, each one with about 10 pounds of grain, and the water level would come right about to here. And I don't know if you can see, but there are a bunch of blisters in here from the warm water that I put in. And it's really not designed for 165, 155 degrees, and so that also caused me some problems. Now, one advantage that it did have is that I could break up all of the dough balls. Having the grains spread out with that much distance, I could really get in there and bust them up and make sure that there was maximum exposure to the liquid of those grains. There were no dough balls in there, and I was getting up around 75, maybe as much as 85% efficiency at some times. Now with the Igloo Cooler, I started using a brewing bag, and that's also why I started allowing it to sit for 20 minutes, just doing the batch sparge, filling it all the way up, letting it sit for 20 minutes, and then draining it out. You do see that I changed out that picnic spout. That really was a huge benefit, because holding that thing down with your thumb, draining out about 6 gallons of water 3 times became very tiring on the thumbs. But the other problems that I had in here, so when I was sparging, all of the water would come around the grains instead of through the grains, so I needed to allow it to stay. But the other thing that I ended up with was a bunch of dough balls on the inside of the brewing bag. So I switched over to the false bottom, and that really helped me get in there and be able to break up those dough balls, because I could set my paddle all the way down through the grain bed. So there is the false bottom in my cylindrical mash tun, and there is my faucet. This is 14 pounds of grain added, and this is the 5-gallon line, so it's just over 4 gallons. I have some more grains to add in, but I wanted to keep this as a record. And here's my cylindrical mash tun filled up with 25.5 pounds of grain. Right here is the 8-gallon mark, and down here is the 7-gallon mark. I just added 6.5 gallons of water, and you can see I'm right at the 10-gallon mark. So with that number of pounds and that much water, it gives us a mash thickness of about 1.25. Now the mash thickness is based on the ratio between the pounds of grain to the quarts of water. This size of mash tun allows me to do 2 things. On a 10-gallon batch, it allows me to brew a very heavy beer, a high gravity beer, but on a 15-gallon batch, it allows me to brew a low gravity beer, which allows me to go ahead and drink more, and I like to brew a larger batch of those beers anyway. So this is actually the perfect mash tun for me. Now this mash tun did have a cord holding onto one of the handles, which made it secure down here, but I had to cut that because I needed about 1 more gallon of space, and this lid will float, and as long as you have about a centimeter of depth, you're still not going to lose a whole lot of temperature. When I did that, I needed an extra gallon, like I said, and it still held the temperature for the full hour and came out at the same temperature as it went in as. So the insulation, fantastic. Overall, this is a really great mash tun, and even if it's all the way full with 22 pounds of grain, plus 6.5 gallons of water, I can still work it, I can still pick it all the way up because the thickness is only about shoulder thick, so I have a lot of leverage to pull up and set it down where I want it. So if you want to learn more about home brewing, hit the subscribe button. If you enjoyed today's episode, give me a thumbs up, and until next time, you have a fantastic time brewing.